Good morning, y'all. Hope you're doing well today. So in today's message, I want to share with you my thoughts based on my experiences in life, my observations, direct observations in my life, about the difference in how a child grows up and becomes an adult that lives one way versus another. And this is going to be related to someone who chooses a very selfish path, a life of deceit, essentially the narcissistic way of life, versus someone who struggles but genuinely tries to do their best and make the most of their life and live honestly, right? So we're going to be talking about that. And so I've mentioned in my last couple of videos about how I want to explore some more in enmeshment, and that'll be brought up in this discussion too. So I'll give it a few insights with regards to that. I think it's important when you've been through some things, which we all go through things. It's not like any of us are lucky enough to be able to escape excuse me, tough times, things like that. But some of us, it's taken us many years to be able to wake up, you might say, and put some puzzle pieces together to make sense of things. And so that's why there's this term normalization, and it's like that's what we do. We can normalize things that we shouldn't have because we didn't know any better, and then we can finally at some point during our adult years start to get insight as to why things have been hard for us, but we're just going to talk about the different ways a challenging childhood can affect people. So I hope that you'll find value in the message today, and we'll just have some fun too with it, with just some various topics. You guys know how I like to go way out there on a limb and excuse me, just kind of branch off into different topics. I've got a slight cold, but I'm gonna be all right. So we're gonna push through. Hopefully you can hear me okay. All right, so I'm going to open the discussion by sharing with you my plans for October. If you haven't noticed, my schedule, first of all, I used to have a set schedule, and now it fluctuates a little bit. And it's not ideal. I prefer to have a set schedule, but it's just the way it is right now. And so I'll still try most weeks to present my videos on the usual days that I was doing there for a few months. But I'll have some weeks where it's a little bit off, a little bit different. So I'm still going to shoot for, at least 4 videos a week for you guys, more if I can. But my plan too in October is just to kind of have fun with the whole idea of Halloween. And so I'm planning on having some Halloween themed shows. And here's what I mean. Just talking about roping in some different ideas that are related or could be related to Halloween to use as lenses for our comprehension, just to make sense of things, and to just give us more insight. They're just other avenues to gift us with additional insights that might help to pull all those puzzle pieces together that have been floating around in our mind for some time, right? It's like I've mentioned it before, we have our life experiences and they create these puzzle pieces, but it's kind of like they're floating in our mind and they're not really connecting until something helps us to have a revelation in some way where they actually connect. These pieces can actually come together and connect, and then that's the second stage of wisdom, which is understanding. That's when that happens. So I'm just trying to help that happen, because you've already had all these different life experiences, and I think what happens is when we're unable to connect those pieces and make sense of them and truly gain understanding, we suffer, and we get frustrated. It's like, I ought to be able to make sense of that, but I just can't. So I'm just trying my best to offer you guys all these different lenses to filter your experiences through, so that hopefully you can put them together, and because I think understanding brings you peace. It does for me. So that's excuse me, that's always my plan, my desire. And so let me get some water here, maybe that'll help. yeah, so in October, let's just have some fun with Halloween topics, okay? Here's one example I'm thinking of. Do you guys like Tim Burton's movies? I just think they're the coolest. But you know, they're all kind of dark, right? They all have this dark theme to them, and I love it. And it just kind of, you know, I used to have a Tim Burton art book. It was the coolest. And I don't have it anymore for no reason, but I hope to get another one of these days. But yeah, his art, you know, is very dark. It's considered dark, and it's kind of like, why would people be drawn to that? Isn't that kind of odd? It is to me, even though I like it. It's kind of like I want to study myself and be like, why do I like it? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the appeal of things like that, of art that's a little dark, or even haunted houses. You know, it's kind of like, why do people want to be scared? You know, and it's like, when I was younger, I wanted to be scared. There used to be some big radio stations that you know, would do these seasonal things, and they would have like costume contests and stuff, or they would have haunted houses. They would host haunted houses, and they were pretty good, and I enjoyed going to them, you know, as a teenager and all. But now, later in my life, it's like I just don't care to do it. I don't like to be scared, and I think it's, for me, because the change is because I've lived enough now and experienced enough to see that evil is real, and, or at least I believe it is, based on what I've experienced and seen in life. And so it's too real to me now. It's like, it's all fun and games to go to haunted houses when you think it's fiction, but when you realize it's real, it's like, no, I'm good, you know. So that's been the change for me. But we're just going to talk about those kind of things. I think it'll be interesting and enlightening. I hope you enjoy it. I'm excited. I like to have just a general idea, a general plan of, you know, things to be inspired by, you know, topics to be inspired by. So that's what we're going to do. Oh, and let me just expand here for a minute, because I made a note on it. I almost forgot to share with y'all. So back when, this is when I graduated high school, I went on vacation with my mom, just me and my mom, and it was a really fun time. We went to the beach together, and you know, a lot of kids, I know, they go like on these big outings with their classmates and stuff, but I just went with my mom, and we went to this little theme park at the beach, and they had a haunted house. And y'all, I'm gonna tell you straight up, this haunted house, I was kind of shocked, because at the time I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it, let's go through, you know, like no big deal. It'll just be kind of like, oh, it's cute, you know, maybe a few scares here and there. But when we went through this thing, and I'm sure she's watching this right now, she's gonna be like, yep. She actually went through it another time with different people, because I wouldn't go back through it with her again. I wouldn't do it. So it was that good. They had like literally like movie quality props. It was incredible. So like, when you went in, there was just this little path, and on each side, I mean, real narrow, and on each side they just had these elaborate setups, like scenes, and a lot of them were from movies. And as you passed through, you know, you could hear this loud music. The music would change for the theme of that movie. So like, they had the I don't know, I never watched these movies, like the Pinhead guy, the really white skin with all the pins sticking out of him. I didn't know if that was a person. He was that real looking, just standing there real still. Turns out he was a statue, but he looked so real, I didn't know if he was about to open his eyes and jump at me. You know what I mean? They had like Freddy Krueger type stuff. Oh my gosh. And that was, you know, playing that music. There was like, the 1, 2, I don't remember the song, but it's like a childhood song they played in those movies. Wow. And then we went on through, and very graphic stuff that was realistic. It was like electric chairs, and it was just dark, and then it would illuminate, and you would see these horrible things. And then we went to this one room. If you don't want to hear this stuff, you might want to fast forward, okay? I'll give a thumbs up when I'm done talking about this. But we went through this one room that was dark, but it had like these flickering, flashing lights, like, you know, like a bad connection type lighting. And there were these like body bags hanging down. Like, you went to this dark room, you didn't know what was in there, but there were things that just kept kind of bumping into you, and you were trying to find your way to the door, and then the lights started flashing, and all you could see your imagination fills in the gaps, see. So this, in this room, it could have been like really poorly made props. You're not going to know the difference, because if you get the impression that this is what it is, your mind's going to fill in the gaps. And I'm going to be honest with you, to me, the scariest movies ever are the ones that don't show you everything, but just kind of show you enough to let your imagination run wild. And so there were like these horrible like body bags with, real kind of gory and stuff with the plastic inside the plastic. Oh my gosh. Both of us in that room started to really be affected by this haunted house. And so I had to calm my mom down, which is rare. Like she's tough. So that was rare for me to have to do that. And then as I was doing that, I thought, man, this is way more than I expected. So I just started like running, trying to find the door, and I couldn't find the door out of the room. And I heard this voice, somebody working there, they were like, this way, like, okay, they need some help to get out of this room. So they helped me to, hear their voice and find my way out of that room. Well, anyway, at the very end of it, let me just sum up and say this. At the very end of it, I wanted so bad to be out of that place. When I did see the exit door for sure, I ran at it so hard, I was going to bust it open with my shoulder, and I hit the side of the door. I hit the wall beside the door frame. So I didn't bust open it. I busted my shoulder instead. So I hope that gave you some laughs. If you fast forwarded and you didn't want to hear all that, you can unmute now or whatever. So that was it for me. That was the last haunted house I went through that I can remember, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, it was fun. but yeah, it was kind of, so it's kind of like, why do people want to be scared? And so we'll explore things like that, and then that right there, thinking about all that, got me to thinking about just in studying human behavior and stuff, it's kind of like, why do people seek thrills? And it's almost like with narcissistic people, they're described a lot like robots. It's like they're so empty and void of empathy that it's like they have no emotion. It's how they seem. So I'm going to share with you just some thoughts to get the wheels turning for you to maybe pull puzzle pieces together and make connections in your mind about the different paths a person's life can take. Okay. So pain in childhood can obviously be from a huge myriad, a variety of different experiences, and let's just kind of branch off on each direction and kind of see where it takes us. First of all, one way would be, one result of pain in childhood would be self-abandonment. It's almost like this self aspect, this individual identity doesn't really ever form. And we're going to talk about the reason for that in a minute, but it's like self-abandonment or absence of self, or however you want to call it. And I associate that with like a narcissistic person, because essentially they're living their whole life behind a mask, right? And that's really all there is to them. We talk about how they're robotic, there's not any substance, to them, things like that. They have to copy people, okay? And I do think that spawns personally from, is spawn the right word? I think that comes from pain in childhood. Now, the other direction a person's life can take from pain in childhood, instead of self-abandonment, would be self-preservation, which might manifest in attempts to escape the painful situation, like coping with, like through just reading constantly and just wanting to be alone in your room, or even blaming yourself, even just sitting there, taking on the responsibility that really never belonged to you as a child, thinking that, it's your fault that your parents are emotionally unstable or whatever it is. The thing is, you still have a self in that situation because you're struggling. You're suffering. Anytime you're suffering and you're struggling, that means there's something there that's being affected within you. There is a self there. It hasn't been just abandoned, or it's not that it never developed or whatever it is. It's there. It's there within you, but it's suffering. So take heart in that, even though it's not easy. If that, description matches your experience, just take heart that, a lot of people, when they go through a psychologically abusive relationship or friendship or whatever, they come away from it unsure of themselves, like, am I a narcissist? They question themselves. And I'm just trying to give you clarity with that too. There's a difference here. So what's the difference? And a person who turns out to be narcissistic, who functions totally behind a variety of masks depending on their circumstances and the people they're around or whatever, I feel like that happens because there was never a foundation built in their life, in their childhood, that was founded on connection. There was never, it's almost like, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but when a child develops, there has to be this foundation of belonging, and you might say love even, but just minimum connection, actual like intimacy with another person, like with feelings. Like this little kid has to experience that at that level, at the intimate level, this connection, this love from a loving mother, for example, family, whatever it is. They need that for the self to develop. Okay, and I'm not a psychologist. This is just my opinion based on some very valid observations that kind of like check one another off. So I feel confident saying this to you, even though it is my opinion. Okay, I feel confident about it because this has become my truth. So they never had that. Okay, the pain in their life has been because they never felt like they belonged. There was never any connection. They kind of just were born into this world alone, and they lived alone. Even if they were physically in the house with, whoever raised them, they were essentially alone from the get-go. You see what I'm saying? Always. So this self never developed. Or, I don't know how it works. If you were born with a self and it was abandoned early or whatever, okay? Now, on this flip side, pain can manifest in one's childhood because there's too much connection. This can be like if you are abused. In other words, your boundaries are plowed down. There's not a normal, in a good, healthy family, you're going to have a balance of connection. You are going to have connection, but it's not going to be like one that's so intense that it's plowing down your boundaries in one way or another, okay? It's just going to be a healthy amount of, and the right kind of connection. You see what I'm saying? So we're talking about these two extremes of the spectrum on the topic of connection. You have a narcissistic person whose childhood, they had no connection. And then you have someone who isn't narcissistic, but that, has struggled. They had too much connection. And so this plowing down on boundaries can manifest in a lot of different ways. Obviously, it can happen with a child that, experienced their physical boundaries being totally disregarded, with physical abuse or molestation or whatever like that, things like that. Or it could also just be energetic boundaries were plowed down. Like they weren't allowed to have their own feelings and thoughts. They were just constantly invalidated by a controlling person in their family. So they weren't really ever allowed to assert themselves as their own person. Okay, but they still had a self. They were still able, to retain this self. They just suffered because the self was never validated or respected by anybody else in their family. Do you see what I'm saying? There's too much connection. So, see if I can, yeah. So, what this means is on this side where there's too much connection, that's enmeshment. That's what that is. It's where nobody respects anybody else's boundaries, and nobody takes responsibility. Like if it's a large family or there's a controlling person. In other words, there's just no respect for individuals within this situation. Okay, and then over here, that's enmeshment. Then over here, where the child grows up alone essentially, and they're not supported, they're not guided, there's no connection. Essentially the people in this family, it's kind of like they're living totally separate lives. So again, now you have this spectrum, and we're talking about these two opposite ends, okay? You're not even allowed to live a separate life. It's kind of like that man of war jellyfish, where everybody's just so enmeshed over here that it's like you don't really feel your sense of self, but it's there. It's just not acknowledged or respected. It's just a big chaotic mess. And then over here you have people, boundaries are respected, but they're respected so much that it's like you're just totally alone in this family. Okay, totally separate. These people are living totally separate lives. There's no connection at all. And the result on your spirit, your life force energy, the result over here where people are living totally separate lives, I feel like, is that it's kind of like there's this void that this person lives with. This void of this life force energy. But then over here, where it's just a big chaotic and meshed mess, it's like there's energy there, but it's chaos. You see what I'm saying? Too much energy and too little energy. Again, there's, it's out of balance. So if you think about energy in terms of vibrations, which you hear that term a lot with it, an observable example would be throwing a rock in a river or a pond, okay? And when you throw that rock in, it's like there's these waves or ripples, right, that are created, all right? But if there's, it's kind of like that would be balanced, right, visually. If we're visualizing, what does this mean? That's like a single rock, that's dropped in, in a timely manner. It's like there's this normal, steady flow of this life force energy within this environment of a group or family or whatever. And so over here you have, there's no dropping of a rock at all. There's nobody there to even drop the rock. There's no life happening over here in this family, okay? There's a void. And then over here on this side, you got rocks coming from every angle, and nobody knows when to stop or stuff like that. So it's chaos, okay? So back over here where there's no rocks being dropped, it's like the energetic dynamic of that family is stagnant. There's no life there. And again, I go back to that that way I describe that kind of spirit. It's like the spirit of decay. It's like if there's no life there, you can't just make something from nothing. It's kind of like you're not going to create a family out of thin air. It's like you have to actually do something to make connection happen. There has to be some effort put in. Okay? You can't just have a kid and do nothing. You have to actually put forth effort. And I know people who have had this kind of life experience. They're truly, their family, everybody lives separate lives. I mean, it's kind of like, I can't even imagine what that would be like, okay? So I'm wondering if what happens to that person who grows up in this environment over here, where there's a void of life force energy, I feel like in their core, they feel empty. And so, I feel like they may actually attempt to fill that void in almost like a self-preservation type way, but they do it to the extreme by doing or participating in extreme acts to overcompensate. But see, they still feel empty. They're never satisfied. That's people who just have to have constant attention. They interrupt constantly. They whatever they have to do to keep the attention on them. They make inappropriate comments or jokes, or they make stabs at you just to any kind of attention is good attention to these people. They just they go out and just engage in what's the word I want to use? Just totally inappropriate, extreme acts, be it, sexual or criminal acts. It's just like this. They're just grasping so desperately to fill this void. Okay, so if you think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's interesting because the graphic is like this mountain, and at the base of the mountain the foundation piece of it is your physiological and your safety. So in other words, you got to have food, you got to have water, you got to have shelter and safety, things like that, right? Which, you know, most of us, at least in I feel like in America, or many of us, you know, we've got that. So I wouldn't say that the issues, you know, that I'm talking about in this video, I'm not talking about issues springing from those two levels. I'm talking about the next level up would be, the third level up is connection and belonging. See, so you got 2 more levels above that. So as long as you got food and water and shelter and you're safe, then if this next piece, the connection and belonging, doesn't happen, or there's an issue with it, then there's going to be problems. And that's where there's a difference in people who have either experienced not enough connection or too much connection, right? And so the level beyond that is esteem. And if you look at this graphic, this little mountain graphic, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll see what I'm talking about. But there's an expansion on what this means, you know, belonging. The next step up is esteem. And everything that's described in that level requires a self, a healthy self, an independent self. It requires self-authority and autonomy. So, and then of course the peak of the mountain is self-actualization. So, narcissistic type people, see, in their childhood, they may have lived totally separate lives amongst their family and never experienced connection. But I feel like these people, the reason they seem so confident, overly confident sometimes, is because they did find belonging, but they just found it in an unethical way. They found it, this is where a lot of people, when they don't have a family to connect to, sometimes they'll join gangs and stuff, and they're criminal. And so they found that belonging, you know, but it wasn't a good place to belong. You see what I'm saying? So they're able to move on in the hierarchy. They're able to have this self and even self-esteem and feel self-worth, but it's corrupted. Okay? And whether these people are in a gang or not, it could be someone who's living like a double life, who's living this stuff out, you know, just involved in some kind of totally unethical, shameful or criminal activity, but they're doing that behind closed doors, and they've got this facade that they present to their families and communities of this stable life, a family with kids or whatever it is, and that's the person people think that they are, but really they're this person over here who did find belonging early on, and that's their true family, but it's just all unethical and corrupted. You see what I'm saying? And then the difference over here with these people who who had too much connection, that their boundaries were plowed down. They retained the self. They retained it. And that's why you suffered. You can't suffer, I don't think, theoretically, if there's no self there to suffer. Kind of sounds logical, don't it? But I feel like if you suffered, you retained yourself. And yeah, it doesn't mean you always made every decision the right way. You know, none of us are perfect. But the difference is, that's why sometimes you can feel like, why does this person over here, who I have found out to be very unethical, they have super high self-esteem? That's why, you know. And then you're like, I struggle with that. I struggle with anxiety, or I struggle with depression. Well, it's because you're trying to climb that mountain ethically. You're trying to do it the right way. You didn't just jump into some, you know, totally wrong group or connection just out of desperation for belonging. You struggled alone. You struggled for a long time. You suffered, and to retain that inner guiding light, you know, your inner moral compass, your code of ethics, you retained that, but you suffered for it. See, but you're climbing the mountain. It's just, that's why sometimes it can feel like, you know, you hear people say, why do all the good things happen to bad people? Well, they may have got up to the top, but they didn't do it the right way. And so, you may still be working yourself up that mountain, just trying and struggling, but but you're doing it the right way. That's the difference. That's the whole difference right there. So these narcissistic people have essentially a false claim to power. It's a false sense of power. It's not really true. So I want to wrap this up by reminding you of when you're doing it the right way, it kind of just illuminates some meaning onto that Bible verse that says that the meek shall inherit the earth. You see what I'm saying? So people who went in through the back door, you might say, to try and obtain, putting themselves at the top, it's not going to last. Just take comfort in that, and that and I don't wish bad on anybody. So when I say take comfort in that, it's kind of like if you're still at a place where you're really struggling from being hurt, then maybe you can find some comfort in knowing that. But ideally we would get to a place of being healthy enough that we don't hold any resentment in here. We just see things for how they are. We've been able to detach emotionally, and we can just focus on us and wish the best for everyone else. And so take comfort in that, if you are going about it the right way, then that's going to be lasting. It will last, and it's true, and it's founded on truth, and you're doing the right thing. So I hope that this has given you some insights today. I thank you for coming along to hear the message. I hope that it was enjoyable to listen to, educational, and I really hope that it pulled some of those puzzle pieces together for you. So thank you again. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.